welcome to my channel, and today's video is, I believe, the 7th video in my series where I am reviewing films requested by fellow horror YouTubers, my friends. And today's video is requested by Emma from Spooky Astronauts. She wanted me to watch the 2011 Aussie found footage film, The Tunnel. To start off, I had a hell of a time finding this to watch actually, but I ended up finding it to watch on YouTube, and I will leave a link to that in the description below in case you guys want to check that out. So let's go ahead and just getting into talking about this film. If you've been on my channel for a while, you'll know that found footage, not exactly my fave, but Emma requested this, so of course I watched it, and to be honest, pleasantly surprised by this film. The story is about a group of journalists who go into these underground tunnels, I believe in Sydney, Australia, and they're there to investigate this kind of story that has come up of these like homeless that are living and then disappearing in these tunnels, and it's become kind of this news thing. They include clips in the movie of like the news kind of talking about this and like different journals kind of asking like the Sydney government like what's going on, what's the real story under there. So this group led by this woman named Natasha and 3 other men go down into the tunnels to try and figure out exactly what is going on. And I really like the way that this film was done. It had a very documentary style feel to it. There was a combination of their own footage as well as like street camera or police camera footage from the same areas, only outside of the tunnels, and what was going on outside of the tunnels at the same time as well. They're in the tunnels. That makes sense. And I really liked that aspect of it. It also featured 2 of the journalists, Natasha herself and Steven, talking about the events and kind of everything before and during the tunnels. So you already knew that those 2 people were gonna make it out, and it really went from them going underground to cover this tunnel story to them kind of creating this documentary of what happened to them specifically while they were down there. And I really liked that. I thought it was definitely different for a found footage film. It wasn't so much just like somebody discovered this footage of these people that died or disappeared and was then showing it. It was the people themselves who were involved that were sharing the story. And that's something I've not really ever seen in found footage. But then again, I don't watch that much found footage. Now, I don't want to get into too many spoilers for this film because I definitely think it's probably something not a lot of people have seen. And I definitely think if you are a found footage fan, you will probably enjoy this and should check it out. And even if you're like me and you're not that big of a fan, you may like this, especially if you do like documentaries, because I do really enjoy documentaries, especially on like the creepy and true crime, and it gives that kind of vibe, almost like a kind of true crime documentary, which may have been why I ended up enjoying it so much. I will say it's a bit of a spoiler, so apologies, but there is a creature within the tunnels that is, making, I guess, the homeless disappear, that towards the end of the film they do have to kind of try to escape. There is one particular scene where we get our first kind of view of this creature through the lens of a night vision camera, and and during that scene, I will say, like, I was on the edge. I was like, oh my god, like, what is going on? That thing was definitely totally creepy. And when it started coming out of the water and they realized that it sees them, I was like, like, that part definitely freaked me out. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a super terrifying film, but I will say that there are scenes like that throughout it that definitely had me on the edge. Now, because this is a found footage film, there is quite a lot of shaky camera, which I know some people are not a big fan of. I personally usually am not a big fan of that. It does obviously work for this film and has to be done, makes sense. Like I said, there is use of a night vision camera, which I'm also usually not the biggest fan of, which may play into me not being the biggest fan of found footage in general. But for this film, there are a lot of scenes where it plays into it really well. I feel like so often it's used to be like, oh look, we're using night vision and it makes it scary. And this film didn't necessarily do that. There are parts throughout, like, you know, shakiness where it's through the night vision film, and so you're not seeing much. But there are scenes where they have to use the night vision camera, and it plays out really well for that scene. And so it didn't quite bother me as much. But if you are not a fan of the shaky camera or night vision, there's just that warning. I will say this film does have a bit of a slow burn to it. There is a big chunk of the film that is spent before they even get into the tunnels, talking about not only the kind of story and explaining like why they're gonna go into the tunnels, which made sense. Like I said, they use like news clips and things to explain like the story and what's going on. But then they also dive into kind of this drama between like the journalists and having this history, and it's very obvious that these, you know, men start out not really respecting Natasha, and there's like this whole history between all of them, which I wasn't really a fan of. I thought that was kind of like this unnecessary added drama that I don't really necessarily feel played too much into when they were in the tunnels. I mean, it kind of does explain the dynamic between these characters, that they're not the best of friends going down into this tunnel together. You know, they're not like this pal group that's like, yeah, let's go on this adventure, get this story together. They are these journalists that, even though they don't have, you know, the greatest love for each other, they're willing to work together to cover the story, which I felt was also a great direction that they went with this film. But I don't think that you needed to elaborate so heavily on it in the beginning. And if they hadn't done that, we could have gotten a little bit more time within the tunnel itself. Because that time really is, because that time is fairly short within the amount of time this film takes place. It's an hour and a half, it's not a 2-hour film, so it is still on a bit of a shorter side, just as an FYI. But all in all, I surprisingly did really enjoy this film, especially for it being found footage. So if you have seen The Tunnel, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Again, there will be a link in the description to watch it if you have not seen it, and a shout out again to Emma from Spooky Astronauts. Thank you so much for participating in this series. If you guys are not subscribed to her, check out her information in the description below, along with all of my social media. And before I go, quick shout out to my Patreons. Thank you guys so much for helping to contribute to the channel. And links to all of that information down below as well. And I'll see you guys later with another video. Bye.